classroom was quiet, except for the faint scratching of pencils on paper and the occasional shuffle of feet. In the middle of the room sat a little girl, her small hands folded on the desk, her eyes wide and cautious. She loved school, but she always stayed quiet, letting others speak louder and draw attention. Music had always been her safe place, the world outside her thoughts where she could lose herself and feel free. But today, she felt a weight in her chest that she could not explain. The teacher walked down the rows, her eyes sharp and critical, scanning every student as if searching for mistakes to highlight. She had a reputation for being strict, for not hesitating to embarrass children who did not meet her expectations. It wasn't cruelty for its own sake, but a belief that fear and pressure could push students to perform better. Most of the children stayed quiet when she passed by, their heads lowered, careful not to attract her attention. The little girl tried to make herself as small as possible, shrinking into her seat, hoping not to be noticed. But the teacher stopped abruptly beside her desk, a knowing smile on her face that made the girl's stomach twist. "You," the teacher said, pointing a finger firmly. "Come here. I want to see if you can play something for the class." A murmur went through the room. The little girl's heart raced. She had never played in front of the whole class before. Not everyone knew she could play the piano, and the thought of standing up in front of her classmates, of everyone staring at her, was terrifying. She felt the eyes of her peers on her, some curious, some skeptical, others whispering and giggling. Her small hands trembled as she slowly rose from her seat. The teacher led her to the corner of the classroom where a small keyboard had been placed. It wasn't much, just a modest instrument, but to the girl it felt enormous. The teacher gestured to the seat. "Sit. Play something. Let's see what you've got." The girl nodded silently, trying to keep her hands from shaking. She had practiced for hours at home, but never under this kind of pressure. The teacher's eyes were sharp, scanning her every movement, ready to point out mistakes. She could feel the weight of expectation pressing down, but she also felt a spark of determination. She wouldn't let fear control her. She loved music too much to let it be a source of shame. She placed her fingers on the keys, taking a deep breath. The room seemed to grow quieter, the other children leaning forward slightly, curious about what would happen. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, imagining the piano at home, imagining herself playing for the warmth of her own comfort rather than for judgment. Then she opened her eyes and pressed the first key. The sound was soft, almost timid, but it carried a note of hope. She played a simple melody at first, careful, letting her fingers find their way across the keys. The teacher's eyebrows arched slightly, surprised that the girl's touch was not as unsteady as she had expected. The students exchanged glances, unsure of what to think. The little girl continued, her confidence growing with each note. Her hands moved more freely now, the trembling fading, replaced by focus and a quiet strength. As she played, memories of her private practice came rushing back. She remembered the late evenings at home when she would sit by the piano, alone, letting the music flow from her heart. She remembered the small encouragements from her family, the smiles and nods that told her she was doing well. Those memories gave her courage, and slowly, the classroom, the teacher's critical eyes, the whispers of her classmates, all faded into the background. There was only the music and her connection to it. The melody grew richer, more expressive. The little girl added little flourishes she had learned from her favorite pieces, letting her fingers dance across the keys. She could feel the energy in the room shift. The children who had been skeptical were now leaning forward, their eyes wide with surprise. Some even stopped whispering, caught by the unexpected beauty of the music. Even the teacher, who had intended to embarrass her, seemed momentarily stunned. The girl's mind raced with a mix of fear and exhilaration. She knew she was doing well, and the thought gave her a strange kind of courage. She let herself go, allowing the music to fill the room, to fill her, to carry her beyond the anxiety that had gripped her at first. The notes were no longer just sounds. They were her voice, telling the story she couldn't put into words, expressing her feelings more clearly than she ever could otherwise. Time seemed to stretch as she continued to play. Each chord, each note, felt deliberate and purposeful. She could hear the subtle changes in her classmates' reactions. The widening of eyes, the soft smiles, the leaning forward as if drawn in by the music. She could feel the teacher's gaze upon her, sharp and intense, yet now mixed with something she had not expected. Curiosity, maybe even admiration. By the time she finished, a quiet stillness hung in the air. The last note lingered, vibrating through the room, before fading into silence. The little girl's chest heaved slightly, a mixture of relief and pride coursing through her. She had done it. She had faced her fear, stood before her classmates and teacher, and let her music speak. For a moment, nobody moved. The teacher's face was unreadable, a mask that hid any emotion. Then, slowly, the room erupted into applause. It started with a few hesitant claps, but soon all the children were clapping, some even cheering. The girl looked around, stunned by the reaction. She had not expected this. The teacher, too, finally nodded, a small, almost imperceptible acknowledgement that the girl had succeeded beyond expectations. As she sat down, the little girl felt a new sense of confidence blooming inside her. She realized that fear could be faced, that pressure could be transformed into strength, and that her love for music was more powerful than any attempt to shame her. The experience had been terrifying, yes, but it had also been liberating. She had discovered a part of herself that she hadn't fully known existed. The rest of the day seemed to move in a blur. Class continued, but the little girl noticed that the atmosphere had changed. Her classmates looked at her differently now, with a mix of respect and curiosity. Some came up to her quietly after class, complimenting her playing, asking her to show them more. She smiled politely, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with pride alone, but with the connection she had created through music. The teacher, for her part, seemed quieter, more thoughtful than usual. She continued to teach, but there was a subtle shift in her demeanor. The little girl had not only surprised the students, but she had also surprised the teacher, challenging the assumptions that had been made in that classroom. The lesson had been meant to intimidate, but instead, it had revealed talent, courage, and the power of determination. That day marked a turning point for the little girl. She walked home with a lightness in her step, her mind replaying the music she had played, feeling proud but also humbled by the experience. She knew there would be other challenges ahead, other moments where she would have to face fear, but she also knew now that she could rise to them. The music had been her shield and her sword, protecting her from doubt and cutting through the skepticism around her. Even in the days that followed, the memory of that moment stayed with her. Whenever she practiced at home, she remembered the classroom, the expectant faces, the teacher's sharp eyes, and the way her fingers had danced across the keys. The fear she had felt transformed into determination, the pressure into motivation. She realized that sometimes the greatest tests were not about skill alone, but about courage and heart. Her story, though just beginning, was already shaping her. She had learned that talent could speak louder than words, that humility and courage could turn a moment of potential embarrassment into a moment of triumph. And as she continued her journey with the piano, she carried with her a newfound belief in herself, a quiet but powerful understanding that even in the face of doubt and challenge, she could shine. After that day in the classroom, the little girl felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness every time she thought about school. She had discovered a new confidence, but she also knew that being noticed could bring new challenges. Some classmates who had been skeptical now looked at her differently, and a few seemed jealous of the attention she had received. Still, most were curious, asking her quietly about the piano and how she had learned to play so well. She answered politely, careful not to boast, but inside, she felt proud of herself. At home, she spent more time at the piano, practicing even harder. She wanted to improve, not because anyone was forcing her, but because she wanted to. Music had become more than a hobby. It was a place where she could express herself and find peace. She remembered how nervous she had been in front of the class and wanted to be even more prepared for the next time. Every note she played was a step toward confidence and mastery, a way to show that she could rise above fear. Her parents noticed the change in her. She was no longer the shy child who avoided attention. She spoke more, smiled more, and seemed to carry herself with a quiet strength. They encouraged her gently, reminding her that talent was something to be nurtured, not hidden. Sometimes, they listened to her play, sitting in the living room, amazed at how her fingers moved across the keys with skill and emotion. Their praise was warm and it gave her courage, but she also knew that true accomplishment came from effort, not just compliments. At school, the teacher who had challenged her seemed to act differently as well. The strictness was still there, but there was a subtle shift. The teacher observed her more closely, sometimes calling her forward to demonstrate small exercises, and other times giving her more complex pieces to play. The teacher's intention seemed to have changed from trying to shame her to testing her skills in a serious way. The girl noticed it, and while it sometimes made her nervous, it also motivated her to practice and improve. The other students reacted in many ways. Some still whispered and tried to imitate her notes during free time. Others approached her with admiration, asking her to show them a melody or to teach them a simple tune. The girl, although shy, tried to help where she could, sharing small tips and showing how certain notes work together. In these moments, she realized that music was not just a personal experience, but a bridge that could connect her with others, breaking the walls of fear and misunderstanding. One day, the teacher announced that there would be a small performance for the class. It wasn't a formal recital, but an opportunity for students to show what they had learned. The girl felt a familiar nervousness, remembering the first time she had been asked to play in front of everyone. This time, however, the feeling was different. It was mixed with anticipation and excitement. She knew she could do it, and she wanted to do it well, not to prove anyone wrong, but to express herself through music. She spent the evening before the performance practicing carefully. Her fingers moved over the keys with precision, learning to balance speed with clarity. She remembered the lesson from the first day. Music was more than hitting the right notes. It was about emotion, timing, and feeling. She repeated the melody over and over, imagining the classroom, the faces of her classmates, and the teacher's watchful eyes. With each repetition, she felt stronger, more prepared, and more certain of herself. On the day of the performance, the classroom was alive with quiet excitement. Some students were nervous, others were excited to see their friends perform. When it was her turn, the little girl walked to the piano calmly, her hands steady despite the fluttering in her chest. She had learned to breathe deeply, to focus on the music rather than the audience, and to let her heart guide her fingers. The moment she touched the keys, a calm washed over her. The classroom noise faded, replaced by the flowing melody of her music. She began with a simple piece, gentle and flowing, allowing the notes to fill the room. The classmates watched, some leaning forward, mesmerized by the ease with which she played. The teacher's expression was unreadable at first, but the eyes followed her closely, noting her skill and composure. As she progressed, she added a few small variations she had practiced, subtle flourishes that made the piece her own. Each note resonated with emotion, a quiet story told without words. By the time she reached the middle of the piece, the students were fully attentive. Some faces were awed, some curious, and some thoughtful, as if trying to understand how such talent could exist quietly among them. The teacher's lips pressed together in concentration, watching the little girl move effortlessly across the keys. There was no mocking, no doubt, only a quiet attention that made the little girl feel the weight of responsibility. She knew she had the chance to show that music could speak louder than fear or judgment. The final section of the piece was the most challenging, a series of fast notes and intricate patterns that required focus and control. The little girl's fingers flew over the keys, her eyes on the music, but her mind also calm and focused. She had practiced this part many times, but now, in front of the class, it carried a new significance. She wasn't just playing notes. She was telling a story, expressing herself, and showing courage in the face of attention and expectation. As she hit the last note, there was a pause, a brief moment of silence where the classroom seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, applause began. At first, tentative, then louder and stronger as the students clapped and cheered. The little girl smiled quietly, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. She had done it again, faced the eyes of others, and let her music speak for her. The teacher nodded slightly, acknowledging her accomplishment in a small but meaningful way. The day continued with other students performing, but the little girl's performance lingered in everyone's minds. Some students came up to her, asking for tips, complimenting her playing, or simply expressing their admiration. Even those who had been jealous or skeptical seemed to recognize her dedication and skill. The girl realized that her talent was not only a gift for herself but also something that could inspire and connect others. In the days that followed, she noticed subtle changes. Students treated her with more respect, and she felt more comfortable expressing herself in other areas of school life. The music had given her a voice, a confidence that carried beyond the piano. She also noticed that the teacher, while still strict, seemed to provide more guidance and support. The little girl understood that her courage and talent had shifted the dynamics in the classroom, showing that skill and determination could earn respect and understanding. At home, she continued to practice, but now with a new purpose. She experimented with different pieces, learning new techniques and exploring new emotions through her playing. Her family continued to support her, proud of the progress she had made, but also encouraging her to find joy and fulfillment in music itself, not just in recognition or praise. The little girl felt a deep connection to the piano, realizing that it was a part of her identity, a way to express feelings she could not always put into words. The experience had taught her more than just musical skill. She had learned about courage, about facing fear, and about how determination and practice could overcome doubt. She had discovered that talent alone was not enough. Confidence, preparation, and heart were equally important. And as she continued to grow and improve, she knew that every note she played was a small victory, a step toward becoming not only a skilled musician but also a person who could face challenges with grace and resilience. Through music, she had found a way to communicate, to inspire, and to express herself. And as she looked forward to future opportunities, she carried with her the lessons of those first performances, the importance of courage, the power of practice, and the quiet strength that comes from believing in oneself. The little girl had been practicing for weeks, and the day of the school recital had finally arrived. The air felt thick with anticipation as students, teachers, and a few parents gathered in the hall. The room buzzed with quiet conversations, the rustling of programs, and the occasional nervous laugh. The girl could feel her heart beating faster, a familiar rhythm of nerves mixed with excitement. She clutched her music sheet tightly, her fingers brushing over the edges, trying to calm herself before her turn. She watched as other students performed one by one. Some stumbled over notes, others played confidently, but none captured the attention quite like she hoped to. Each performance reminded her of her own journey, the fear she had overcome, and the quiet strength she had discovered in herself. She thought about the first day the teacher had asked her to play in front of the class, how terrifying it had been, and how she had found a spark of courage she didn't know existed. When her turn finally came, the hall grew quiet. The girl walked toward the piano, her steps steady, her posture upright. She had practiced countless times, but performing in front of the entire school was different. The audience looked at her expectantly, and for a moment, she felt the familiar surge of nervousness. Then she took a deep breath, remembering the calm she had found before, the moments when the music had become her voice rather than something to fear. She sat at the piano, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. The room seemed to hold its breath as she pressed the first note. It was soft, delicate, but confident. Her fingers moved with precision, guided by both practice and intuition. The melody unfolded slowly, a gentle wave that drew the listeners in. The students who had been chatting moments ago now leaned forward, captivated by the sound. Even the teachers seemed to pause, their eyes focused on her as the music filled the hall. The little girl's fingers danced across the keys with growing confidence. She added subtle variations, the touches she had learned and practiced in private. Each note carried emotion, telling a story without words. The audience was drawn in, sensing the care and passion behind every movement. She was no longer playing for approval or to avoid embarrassment. She was playing because the music demanded it, because it was a part of her. Her thoughts drifted to her family, who had always encouraged her quietly. She could almost hear their smiles and soft words of praise, the gentle reminders that talent needed patience and heart. She thought about the hours of practice, the late evenings when she had played alone, building confidence and skill. Those memories strengthened her, letting her play with a mix of technical skill and emotional expression that made the performance feel alive. As the piece progressed, the complexity increased. Fast notes and intricate patterns challenged her focus, but she met each one with determination. The audience could see the concentration on her face, the way her fingers moved almost effortlessly across the keys. Some students whispered to each other, amazed at how skilled she had become. The teachers exchanged glances, impressed by the poise and maturity she displayed at such a young age. Midway through the piece, the little girl closed her eyes briefly, letting the music guide her. She felt each note in her heart, imagining the story she wanted to tell. It wasn't about showing off or proving anyone wrong. It was about sharing something personal, a part of herself that words couldn't capture. The hall seemed to fade away, leaving only the music and her connection to it. She felt free, strong, and in control, her earlier nerves replaced by a deep focus and clarity. The final section approached the most difficult part of the composition. The notes came faster, each one demanding attention and precision. Her fingers flew over the keys, moving with confidence and grace. The audience was silent, completely absorbed, some holding their breath in anticipation. Even the teachers, who had seen many students perform, seemed impressed by the skill and emotion in her playing. The little girl could feel the energy in the room, feeding her confidence, and she let it guide her to the end. With the last note, she paused, letting it linger in the air. The hall stayed quiet for a moment, as if time itself had stopped. Then the applause began, first tentative, then louder, swelling as everyone recognized the brilliance of her performance. Some students clapped with wide smiles, others whispered compliments, and a few even stood, moved by the music. The teachers nodded, acknowledging her talent and dedication. The little girl's cheeks flushed with a mixture of pride and relief, and she allowed herself a small smile. She had faced her fears again and risen above them. The experience was more than just a performance. It was a testament to courage, perseverance, and the power of following one's passion. She had discovered that music could express emotions and ideas beyond words, that talent combined with determination could inspire and move others, and that even in moments of fear, strength could be found. After the performance, several students approached her quietly, asking her to teach them small pieces or showing curiosity about her practice routine. She answered kindly, sharing what she could without arrogance. She realized that her gift was not just for herself but could also connect with others, create understanding, and even inspire them to try harder or face their own fears. Each interaction, each question, reinforced the idea that music was a bridge, connecting hearts and minds. Her teacher, once intending to challenge or even embarrass her, now seemed thoughtful. There was no mocking or pressure, only a subtle respect. The little girl understood that her skill had changed the dynamic, not through confrontation, but through quiet demonstration of talent and courage. It was a lesson for everyone present. Judgment and doubt could be overcome with dedication, heart, and persistence. In the days following the recital, the little girl continued to practice, exploring new pieces and techniques. She experimented with rhythm and emotion, discovering different ways to tell a story through music. Her family remained supportive, listening and encouraging her, but also emphasizing joy over perfection. The little girl began to understand that success wasn't just about recognition, applause, or approval, but about finding fulfillment in the process and expressing oneself honestly. At school, her peers treated her with respect, curiosity, and sometimes admiration. The music had become a part of her identity, a way to communicate and connect that went beyond words. The little girl also noticed that some classmates who had been jealous or doubtful seemed inspired, trying harder in their own activities, perhaps learning a quiet lesson in dedication and courage. She began to approach other challenges with the same mindset she had learned from the piano. Preparation, focus, and calm determination. Fear no longer seemed as powerful, and she found herself willing to take small risks, whether in schoolwork or social interactions. Each note she played, each performance she gave, reinforced the lesson that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Music became her constant companion, a source of confidence, expression, and connection. She realized that performing was not just about skill, but about heart, dedication, and the courage to show a piece of herself to the world. The applause and admiration were meaningful, but what mattered more was the sense of accomplishment, the knowledge that she had faced her fears and let her talent speak. As she looked forward to the future, she knew that there would be more performances, more challenges, and moments of fear. But she also knew that she could meet them, that she had a strength within her, nurtured by practice, passion, and experience. The little girl's journey was only beginning, but she had already learned a powerful lesson. That talent, courage, and heart could overcome doubt and fear, and that sharing one's gift with the world was a reward in itself. Through music, she found not only her voice but also a sense of purpose. Each time she played, she grew stronger, more confident, and more aware of the impact she could have. And as she continued on her journey, she carried with her the knowledge that true strength comes not from avoiding fear, but from embracing it, learning from it, and letting it guide you to moments of triumph and connection. The little girl felt a new sense of purpose after the recital. Her confidence had grown, but she also understood the responsibility that came with her talent. Music was no longer just a private joy. It was a way to connect with others, to inspire, and to share a piece of herself. She spent hours at the piano, not merely practicing, but experimenting, learning to express emotions more deeply through each note. At school, the atmosphere had shifted. Classmates who had once doubted her now treated her with respect. Some sought her advice about music, while others watched quietly, inspired by her dedication. The little girl noticed that the whispers of envy had largely faded, replaced by curiosity and admiration. The teacher who had once challenged her to play now seemed more like a mentor than an adversary, offering guidance and encouraging her to tackle more complex pieces. One day, the teacher announced that there would be a small competition within the school. Students from different grades were invited to perform, and everyone was eager to show their skills. The little girl felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had played before, but the stakes felt higher. The competition was a chance to demonstrate not just talent, but growth, courage, and expression. She knew she had to be prepared. She practiced diligently, repeating challenging sections of her pieces over and over. She experimented with tempo, dynamics, and emotion, learning how to make the music feel alive. Her family supported her quietly, offering encouragement without pressure. The little girl realized that her practice was not about pleasing others, but about becoming the best version of herself and allowing her music to carry meaning. When the day of the competition arrived, the school hall was filled with excitement. Students, teachers, and parents gathered, the air buzzing with anticipation. The little girl waited for her turn, watching the other performers. Some were talented, some struggled, but all had put in effort. She felt nervous but reminded herself of everything she had learned. The importance of focus, courage, and expression. When her turn came, she walked confidently to the piano, feeling a quiet determination. She took a deep breath, placed her hands on the keys, and began. The music flowed, gentle at first, then building with intensity. Each note carried emotion, a story of courage, practice, and heart. The audience watched in awe, drawn into the world she created with her music. Her fingers moved with skill and precision, navigating complex passages with grace. She played with expression, letting the highs and lows of the music reflect her feelings. The hall seemed to transform. The whispers, the rustling, and the nervous energy faded as everyone focused on the music. The teacher watched closely, impressed by how far she had come, her earlier skepticism replaced by admiration. The piece reached its climax, a fast, intricate section that tested both speed and accuracy. The little girl's hands flew over the keys, but her focus never wavered. She felt a connection to the music, as if it were guiding her fingers and telling her story. The audience held its breath, completely absorbed in the performance. When the final note resonated, there was a moment of silence, the kind that feels as if the world itself has paused to listen. Then, the applause erupted. It started softly, then grew louder as everyone recognized the skill, dedication, and heart behind the performance. Some students stood, clapping and cheering. Others whispered compliments and admiration. The little girl felt a rush of relief and pride, knowing that she had given her best and shared her gift with others. The teacher nodded, a small but meaningful acknowledgement of her accomplishment. Afterward, several students approached her, asking questions and seeking guidance. She answered kindly, sharing what she had learned and encouraging them to practice. She realized that her talent was not just for herself. It could inspire and guide others. This understanding brought a new sense of purpose. Music was a way to connect, teach, and encourage, and she wanted to use it responsibly. In the days following the competition, her confidence continued to grow. She approached schoolwork and social interactions with a new sense of courage. Challenges that had once seemed daunting no longer frightened her as much. She had learned that facing fear and performing under pressure could lead to growth, strength, and self-discovery. The lessons she learned at the piano were applicable in many areas of her life. Her family noticed the transformation as well. She spoke more freely, smiled more often, and approached problems with determination rather than hesitation. Music had given her a voice, not just in sound, but in personality and confidence. She continued to practice diligently, experimenting with new techniques and styles, always striving to grow as a musician and as a person. The little girl also began to see the impact of her music on others. Some classmates, inspired by her dedication, practiced harder in their own activities. The teacher, too, seemed to gain a new perspective, realizing that encouragement and guidance could achieve more than pressure and criticism. The little girl's journey had influenced the classroom environment, creating a culture of respect, curiosity, and inspiration. She began to perform in other settings as well. Small recitals, school events, and family gatherings became opportunities to share her music and connect with others. Each performance reinforced the lessons she had learned: courage, preparation, and emotional expression. She realized that talent alone was not enough. It was the combination of skill, heart, and perseverance that created meaningful impact. Through these experiences, the little girl grew not only as a musician but also as a person. She learned to face challenges with resilience, to embrace opportunities with confidence, and to share her gifts with humility and care. Music had become a source of empowerment, a way to navigate life's obstacles and to inspire those around her. The teacher who had once tried to challenge her to shame had unwittingly set the stage for growth. What began as a moment of fear and potential humiliation had transformed into a journey of courage, skill, and personal development. The little girl had turned pressure into opportunity, fear into strength, and doubt into achievement. Her talent had not only silenced skepticism but had also sparked inspiration in those who witnessed it. In quiet moments, she would sit at the piano and reflect on her journey. The keys felt familiar and comforting, a reminder of how far she had come and how much further she could go. Each note carried memories of practice, perseverance, and moments of triumph. She understood now that music was more than just sound. It was a way to communicate, to connect, and to grow. Her story was still unfolding, with new challenges, performances, and opportunities ahead. But she carried with her the knowledge that courage, dedication, and heart could overcome fear and doubt. She had discovered that even in the face of scrutiny and pressure, talent combined with determination could shine brightly and inspire others. The little girl's journey was a testament to the power of resilience, the beauty of expression, and the transformative potential of music. The little girl had come a long way from the first day she had been called to the piano in front of the class. Back then, she had been nervous, unsure of herself, and worried about judgment. Now, she carried a quiet confidence, knowing that music was a part of her, and that she could express herself through it. The journey had not been easy, but every challenge had strengthened her, every performance had taught her patience, and every note had reminded her of her love for music. Word of her talent had begun to spread beyond the classroom. Other teachers spoke about her skill, some parents mentioned her performances, and even students from higher grades had begun to notice. Invitations to play at school events, community gatherings, and small recitals became more frequent. Each time, she felt the same nervous excitement, but it was no longer fear. It was anticipation, a sense that she was about to share something meaningful, something that came from her heart. Before each performance, she would sit quietly, hands on the keys, taking deep breaths. She remembered the first time she had faced the classroom, and it gave her perspective. She had learned that fear was natural, but it could be transformed into focus. She closed her eyes and imagined the music flowing through her, not just as notes, but as feelings, stories, and connections. The audience, whether large or small, became part of her journey, experiencing the emotion she poured into every performance. Her family watched her grow with pride. They had always been supportive, but now they saw the impact her music had on others. Neighbors would stop to listen, friends would ask to hear her play, and teachers often invited her to perform at school programs. Each time, she played with care, mindful that her music could inspire, comfort, or uplift those who listened. The applause and praise were gratifying, but what mattered most was the feeling of sharing a piece of herself through sound. At school, she noticed subtle changes in her classmates as well. Some who had once doubted her now approached her with respect and curiosity. They asked questions about practice, how to learn, and how to stay calm during performances. Others simply watched quietly, inspired to work harder in their own activities. She understood now that talent could influence not only the performer but also those who witnessed it. Music had become a bridge, connecting people and fostering appreciation and encouragement. The teacher who had first challenged her to play remained a presence in her journey. Once strict and intimidating, the teacher now offered guidance and support. Sometimes, the teacher would suggest new pieces, more challenging exercises, or subtle techniques to improve expression. The little girl noticed a quiet change in the teacher's demeanor, a mix of respect and encouragement. She realized that even those who initially doubted or pressured her could become mentors and allies when talent and determination were evident. One day, the school announced a larger event, inviting students to perform in front of an audience of parents, teachers, and community members. The little girl felt a familiar mix of excitement and nerves. This was a bigger stage, a wider audience, and more expectations. She spent days preparing, practicing meticulously, refining details, and experimenting with expression. Each session strengthened her skill, her confidence, and her ability to convey emotion through music. On the day of the event, the hall was filled with chatter, laughter, and anticipation. Students moved to their positions, parents settled into chairs, and teachers made final adjustments to the program. The little girl waited backstage, her hands brushing over the piano keys she would soon play, imagining the music flowing naturally. She took deep breaths, reminding herself of everything she had learned. Focus, patience, courage, and heart. When her turn arrived, she walked to the piano with a calm determination. The audience quieted as she took her seat. She placed her fingers on the keys, closed her eyes briefly, and began. The first notes were soft, gentle, yet confident, like a story beginning to unfold. The music flowed naturally, each phrase carefully articulated, each note carrying emotion. The audience listened intently, drawn into the story she told through her playing. As the piece progressed, it became more complex. Fast passages, subtle dynamics, and expressive variations challenged her focus, but she embraced them. Her fingers moved with precision, her expression revealing the emotion behind the music. She was not playing to impress or to seek approval. She was playing to communicate, to share a part of herself with everyone listening. The audience, captivated, responded with attentive silence, their focus on the music rather than on judgment. In the middle of the performance, she added small flourishes she had practiced in private, subtle touches that made the music uniquely hers. The audience reacted unconsciously, leaning in, some closing their eyes, others smiling softly, experiencing the emotions she expressed. Even the teacher, standing at the back, seemed moved, a hint of pride and admiration in her gaze. The little girl felt a connection with everyone present, a sense that music was a living thing, binding people together through emotion and attention. The final section approached, the most challenging and expressive part of the piece. Her fingers danced across the keys with confidence and grace. She felt the music flowing through her, as if guiding her hands, shaping each note with care and precision. The audience sat in rapt attention, fully immersed in the experience. The climax arrived, each chord resonating with power and emotion. And then she brought the piece to a gentle, deliberate conclusion, letting the final note linger in the air. Silence followed, a pause that seemed to last forever, before the applause began. It was thunderous, warm, and sincere, filled with admiration, excitement, and appreciation. Students clapped enthusiastically, parents smiled proudly, and teachers nodded in approval. The little girl's cheeks flushed with pride and relief, but also with joy. She had shared herself through music, and the audience had felt it, responded to it, and appreciated it. Her talent had spoken louder than words ever could. After the performance, several people approached her, asking for advice, complimenting her skill, or simply expressing how much they had enjoyed her playing. She answered kindly, sharing tips and encouraging others to pursue their own interests. She realized that her journey had a ripple effect. Her courage, dedication, and expression inspired others to explore their talents, to face their fears, and to seek their own ways to shine. In the days following the event, the little girl felt a quiet satisfaction. She knew that her journey with music was ongoing. There would be more performances, more challenges, and more moments of fear to overcome. But she also knew that she had developed tools to face them. Focus, courage, practice, and heart. Music had taught her resilience, expression, and the power of connecting with others through talent and dedication. Her family continued to support her, proud of her growth but reminding her to find joy in the process, not just the recognition. The little girl embraced this philosophy, understanding that each practice session, each performance, and each moment of expression was valuable, regardless of external praise. She had learned that true success came from dedication, perseverance, and passion. Her teachers, classmates, and community had witnessed her growth. They saw a young girl who had transformed fear into confidence, who had turned a moment of potential embarrassment into a journey of inspiration. Her talent had silenced doubt, earned respect, and encouraged others to pursue their own passions. She had become more than a skilled pianist. She had become an example of courage, determination, and the power of following one's heart. As she sat at the piano in quiet moments, she reflected on her journey. The keys felt familiar, comforting, and empowering. Each note reminded her of the challenges she had faced, the perseverance she had shown, and the joy she had found in expressing herself. Music had become a part of her identity, a source of strength, confidence, and connection with others. Looking forward, the little girl knew that her journey was far from over. There would be more recitals, competitions, and opportunities to perform. There would be new challenges and moments of fear, but she carried with her the lessons of courage, practice, and heart. She understood that talent was important, but it was the combination of effort, emotional expression, and resilience that truly made an impact. Through music, she had found her voice, her confidence, and her ability to inspire others. She had faced fear and pressure and turned them into strength. She had shown that even the smallest among us could make a difference, that talent combined with courage could overcome doubt, and that sharing one's gift could touch hearts and minds in profound ways. The little girl's story, once a simple tale of fear and uncertainty, had grown into a journey of triumph, inspiration, and personal growth. She had proven that talent could silence judgment, that courage could overcome doubt, and that music, when played with heart, could create connections that words could not. And as she continued to play, learn, and share her gift, She carried with her the knowledge that her talent, dedication, and heart could continue to inspire and uplift everyone who listened.